Last month I wrote annotations for an Edgar Allan Poe mystery story anthology, so if you want to see me translate French phrases and explain references to plays from the 1700s, I'll leave a link in the description. You can buy the book yourself. The Murders in the Rue Morgue was written by Edgar Allan Poe in 1841. It is famous for being the first detective story ever written. I thought it was very good, an excellent story. Although it does start off on the wrong foot. It starts with a 4-page lecture about the nature of intelligence and observation. I'm sure the introduction was necessary when the story was first written. Nobody had heard of detectives before. Readers were probably confused by the premise that someone can solve crimes just by thinking hard and looking at small details. After the introduction, we meet our detective, C. Auguste Dupin. Dupin is walking down the street with his roommate and best friend. Dupin shows off his amazing detective skills when he explains everything his friend is thinking about step by step. Like, I saw you looking at the road, and I saw you mouth the name of the strange pavement, which reminded you of the constellation Orion, which reminded you of the Greek play you saw last week, and when I saw you stand up straighter, I realized you were thinking of the lead actor's small height. This chain of deductions happens all the time at the start of Sherlock Holmes stories. In fact, Dupin is so similar to Sherlock Holmes, I'm kind of surprised Holmes never got sued for plagiarism. In the newspaper, Dupin reads about a violent pair of murders which occurred on the 4th floor of a house. One victim was choked to death. The only door was locked, so nobody knows how the murderer got in and out of the room. Several witnesses heard 2 distinct voices coming from the room, but they all disagree on the language. There is quite a lot of money and an open safe at the crime scene. I think those are all the major clues. There are a lot more details. Dupin gets permission to investigate. He examines the entire neighborhood as well as the crime scene. While waiting for a visitor, Dupin explains all the steps of the mystery solution one by one. He points out the language inconsistency. The Frenchman thinks the murderer's language is Spanish. The Spaniard thinks the language is English. The Englishman thinks it's German, and so on. The point is that everyone thinks it was a foreign language, and also no one distinguished any particular sounds. Next, Dupin explains the culprit must have entered and left through the window. The police dismissed this possibility because the window was shut, and besides, it's too far away from the roof. Dupin notices it's a lot closer to the roof if you open the window shutters all the way, and a broken nail caused the window to automatically shut behind the culprit once the culprit went through. Still, the culprit must have had almost supernatural strength and agility to get in and out of a window on the 4th floor. There's also a reason to believe in supernatural strength based on the large wounds around the victim's neck. If they were left by fingers, they were giant fingers. As for the money, the culprit left it behind. What criminal doesn't care about money? Dupin puts all these clues together, and he comes to the conclusion that the culprit is an orangutan. I wouldn't say this is a cheat solution, but there are plenty of readers who take offense at the mystery solution. Orangutans were not mentioned earlier. You'd think somebody would have noticed a wild ape on the loose. This is so implausible, it pushes the boundaries of realism. But on the other hand, the story does spend a lot of time justifying this solution. It's not like Poe reached the end of the story and made up a random explanation taken from out of nowhere. He definitely planned the solution well in advance, in detail. Trust me, I have read more than my fair share of mysteries where the author clearly did not bother to think of the solution until the last chapter. Again, this is the first detective story ever written, so I'm willing to give it a pass. Poe is famous for writing weird, dark stories. If you read his non-mystery stories, you will see a murdering ape totally fits his style. The way Dupin solves the mystery is kind of funny. He puts a notice in the newspaper which basically says, "Hey, I found an orangutan. If it's yours, you should come and get it." It totally works. The sailor comes to get the orangutan, and he provides more details about the murder. An interesting thing about the story is that there are no suspects, although there are witnesses. We only read witness statements, we don't meet the witnesses. The German witness is arrested, but the story does not focus much on this. Part of the reason Dupin solves the case is because he wants to help free an innocent person from jail. So that's Murders in the Rue Morgue. I thought it was a very good story, despite its flaws. It probably would not be well received if it was written today, but it is fantastic, considering there were no other detective stories written before this one. In fact, the story doesn't even use the word detective because it didn't exist yet. Instead, the Dupin stories use the word ratiocination, which is far more unyieldy. I give The Murders in the Rue Morgue a 10 out of 10.